Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar here today, Rebuilding the Force, Solving Policing's Workforce Emergency. My name is Logan Seacrest, and I'm be serving as your moderator today. I'm a fellow at the R Street Institute. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy research organization based in Washington, D.C. Our mission is basically to engage in policy research and outreach that promotes free markets and limited effective government. So thank you for taking some time to join us today for this timely discussion about a critical issue, police recruitment and retention. Before we dive in, a few quick housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. We'll be sharing the full recording with, if you signed up via the link, and we'll also be sharing it on our YouTube channel after the event today. And second, we want to hear from you today. If you have a question for any of our experts, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen any time. We'll be collecting those throughout the presentation and saving some time at the end for some questions and answers. So yeah, what are we here today to discuss? Police recruitment and retention. I think it's no secret that law enforcement is facing some severe workforce challenges. Jill and I last year wrote a paper all about this subject that our team here is going to post in the chat. And in that paper, we cite a survey by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, 2024 survey, so a recent survey. The survey found that 70% of agencies are having more difficulty in hiring compared to just 5 years ago. In that time, dozens of the nation's largest departments have shrunk by 10% or more. Some agencies have seen staffing plummet dramatically. New Orleans, Minneapolis, both of these agencies are 40% smaller than they were a decade ago. NYPD, we have a few folks, current and former folks from New York here, and we're seeing very high attrition in the NYPD. Last year, they brought in just 2,300 new recruits, which is 600 short of the number of officers who left. So what we have here, we've got experienced officers are leaving the force faster than we can hire and train their replacements. In our recent paper, we call this the thinning blue line. When it comes to law enforcement staffing, it's not just an HR issue, right? This is a public safety issue. Decades of research have proven that there is a direct link between police presence on the streets and crime rates. The more cops out and about doing their job, the lower crime is. It's a direct correlation. But the challengers here are very layered. There's a very competitive labor market. There is negative perceptions of policing out there in the public. There's this rising tide of stress and burnout. Just one note up front here, law enforcement is a very high-stress profession. Officers are frequently exposed to traumatic events and physical danger. And the job, there's some evidence that the job is even getting riskier than it has in the past. I just cite the statistic from 2021 to 2023, there were 194 officers killed in the line of duty, and that's more than any consecutive 3-year period in the past 20 years. So this all comes at a high cost. The life expectancy of former police officers is something like 20 years shorter than the average Americans. So there's a lot of forces here that are affecting law enforcement recruitment and retention. But we here at R Street are all about solutions, and we're all about real solutions. And today we have some wonderful experts that are going to talk about those solutions with us. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves. So we'll start. How about we start with my colleague Jill and have her introduce herself, and then she can pass it off to whoever she feels, whoever she wants to.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jillian Snyder. I'm a resident senior fellow here at the R Street Institute. I work on their criminal justice and civil liberties team. I'm also a lecturer at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City, and I'm a retired New York City police officer. And I'm going to pass it off to Chief Cox.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Jillian. I appreciate R Street putting this on and inviting me today. So my name is Brendan Cox. I'm the Chief of the Albany Police Department. I'm actually in my second time back with the Albany Police Department. So I came back last December. I was originally with the Albany Police Department from 1994 to 2017. I retired back in 2017 as chief. I originally retired, went on to become the director of policing strategies with the lead support bureau. I was with the lead support bureau for just about 8 years. And then I was asked to come back on an interim basis to the Albany Police Department back in last December. I've been back here since, enjoying my time since being back, and very happy to be here today. And I will pass it over to Jason.
Great. Thanks so much, Chief Cox. My name is Dr. Jason Mazeski. I am currently the Chief of Training at the New York City Taxi and Limousine Police. Before my time here, I was a member of the New York City Police Department for 18 years. I've done extensive research in police training and the changing tides of police culture over the past 10 years.
Nice. Well, you know what, Dr. Mizeski, we'll just start with you. So you used to be with NYPD. Since you were working on recruitment there in your early NYPD days, what challenges do you see training programs facing now?
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Logan. The culture and outward-facing view of policing has changed significantly since I started my career in 2007. When I started my career, the training program was behaviorist in nature. It was based around a very paramilitaristic program where you were told to do what you were told to do, and there was no questioning that. And of course, just with technology, social media, policing has changed at a rate that is exponential to anything we've ever seen. And in 2025, running a training program myself, I find myself being able to go to almost none of what I experienced in 2007. Training programs have to and are starting to pivot towards a more holistic viewpoint of not only the learner and who you have in front of you, being that police recruit or that in-service officer, but more holistic in what exactly we're offering police officers in training. The idea of just having a very myopic viewpoint of policing and what they need, it's changed, and now we're looking at how can we grow these people instead of just growing police.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for that. I'd go to Chief Cox real quick, just in terms of the impact some of these challenges have had. How has the workforce shortage affected your department's ability to just maintain community engagement and deliver good policing services to the community?
Yeah, so we're not a large department, but we're certainly not a small department. We have a sworn allotment of 342 sworn officers. We're down about 20%. We're down about 75 officers. When I left in 2017, we had 27 officers that walked a beat that were assigned to a given neighborhood from 8 a.m. to midnight. And those officers were really the key engagement piece to our community policing philosophy. Certainly our entire department was bought into the community policing philosophy, but they were really the tip of the spear. They were really the officers that were out there ensuring that the community had a point of contact. They were at all the neighborhood engagement, the different pieces of neighborhood engagement. They were at neighborhood meetings. They were sharing neighborhood statistics. They were taking the initial neighborhood complaints, and they were really the officers that were getting to know the neighbors and really the bridge between many of the officers that were handling everyday 911 calls and the neighbors themselves, and really doing a lot of the different surveys, a lot of the different pieces. Being down 20% of our department, that unit has taken a large hit, as a lot of the units have. So we're down to 9 officers walking a beat. So as I walk back into this department, the first meetings I go to are people in the community saying to me, where's my beat officer? Like, my neighbor no longer has the beat officer. I want a beat officer back. And I can't disagree with them, because at the end of the day, we know that public safety is about both reality and perception. It's about those real crime stats that are happening, but it's also about people feeling safe walking down the street, because public safety is not just about those reported crimes. It's also about how people feel when it comes to things around mental health and substance use and homelessness. And if they're not seeing an officer out on the street, just like you talked about, Logan, then they're not feeling safe. So when we don't have the officers to put out on the street that they can actually see, they can get to know, our community engagement's going down. So that's something that we felt a real hit on. And until we get officers back out there, or until we find alternative methods to get other people to help fill those gaps, we're going to continue to feel that pain.
Right. Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up community policing there. I was at the International Association of Police Chiefs conference recently. There was a lot of technology on display there. There was a lot of drones as first responders kind of presentations. And I think there's some hope that this problem can be solved using better technology. And I think it can to some degree. But in terms of community policing, a drone isn't going to be very good showing up at the neighborhood barbecue, right? A drone is never going to be able to ask, how are the kids doing in the neighborhood, right? So I think we do really still need, live humans to perform a lot of these community policing duties that you speak of. So I'm glad that you brought up that point. Now, Jill, I'd like to go to you for a sec. Just drawing on your law enforcement background for a minute here, what were some of the early warning signs that you saw that officer retention and recruitment were starting to be a problem and were beginning to decline?
So I saw the cracks before most people started talking about it. A lot of us in this community really took notice in 2020, but I'm sure both Chief Cox and Dr. Mazeski could attest to, I feel like we started seeing it particularly in New York State around 2014. The first red flag was how thin the shifts got. I remember trying to take like a random day off and being denied, and they said, "Oh, we can't turn out 4 sector cars, so there's no way that you're going to get the day off." And it wasn't because it was a holiday and we were already short-staffed or there was a snowstorm. It was just we literally didn't have the personnel to fill cars. So the result, of course, was predictable. Forced overtime became the norm. Sometimes they would change me from special ops to just cover a patrol shift because they couldn't turn out a 2-man sector. And that's how you start burning out your force. So, and the second sign is who's leaving. You kind of have that expectation that the 20-year veteran, the 25-year veteran, they're going for retirement. But when you start seeing people with 6, 7, 9, 10, 11 years just jumping ship, going to another agency, or just completely leaving policing altogether, that signals like a true problem. Again, we have the hiring pipelines, another serious issue. And Logan, I know I can go on all day about this, but agencies used to have to go through their applicants and really look for the best possible candidate. We started throwing out some standards because agencies didn't really see a lot of other options. So instead of having this really robust and highly motivated workforce, we're just like, all right, we're just going to pick whoever's willing to put in an application. And to me, that is not making the best decision. That is not trying to choose the creme de la creme of who we want to serve the public. But that is unfortunately what agencies have started to do. So it's really not something that's relatively new in the last 5 years. We've been seeing this problem for over a decade.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I want to go back to Dr. Mazeski for a second. I'd like to talk about a little bit about training and how we are ensuring new recruits are prepared and motivated to stay long term. The reason I want to talk about this is that most officers who quit law enforcement do so within the first 3 years. I think the fact that so many young officers come into the field, experience the job, and leave almost immediately indicates that many departments fail to properly manage expectations around what being a police officer is actually like. I think often there's a kind of a focus kind of exclusively on the positive or maybe the exciting aspects of law enforcement, maybe those kind of paramilitary aspects that you mentioned earlier. Even though when the reality is maybe less like what you see on those TV, like a Law and Order or something. It can be more boring. It can be at times too exciting, right? But I think a fully transparent hiring process can help dispel some of these romanticized notions and kind of accurately calibrate expectations, through ride-alongs or whatever, before someone's actually hired. So I just want to ask you, Dr. Mazeski, given your experience working specifically in departmental training, how do you ensure new recruits are both prepared and motivated to stay in that job long term?
Yeah, it's so I think there's two avenues to go down when it comes to this question. Number one is what can training do, right? And I said earlier, right, invest in people, not just the police. And when we look at the recruits coming in, especially the younger recruits of a younger generation, they have been brought up in a different society with different norms than a lot of us who have been around for a while are used to. And one of those norms being, well, they want people to invest in them, right? So when it comes to our training programs and the training programs that I've implemented here is shifting away from throwing more tactical or procedural training and shifting more towards, well, how do we make you just better people? How do you communicate better? How do you listen better? How do you speak better, right? Not many police departments or police training programs spend much time with their recruits saying, okay, do you know how to effectively create a sentence? And I know it seems like it's something that's intuitive, but when we talk about just the plethora of information we throw at the police recruits, penal law, criminal procedural law, city and state ordinances, and they're expected to now be able to articulate their actions based on these procedures. But we spend no time really saying, well, how do you just speak like a human being? So when it comes to investing in our training programs in the police department, shifting towards, I want to invest in you as a person, right? And letting the recruit or that new officer know that we're interested in investing as a person and not just a police officer. And that leads me to the second part of this, which I think is policing as an industry as a whole continues to look at this problem as a, well, how do we get people to stay? If you look at any other industry out there, they've all identified the fact that social norms at this point sees longevity at one single employer as stagnation. So it's not anymore the idea of, well, you stay for 20 years because you're loyal somewhere. The idea of loyalty really has fallen out of practice. And now younger generation, new employees, fresh people out of college see many jobs as stepping stones, right? So they'll stay somewhere for 3 or 5 years and they'll leave not because they're not happy anymore, but because they understand that if they stay there for any longer, they're not growing. And if you look at, and I'll use my experience in NYPD, where when I got on in 2007, right, you were always told, kid, don't even think about going into a specialty unit until you have 5 years on the job. And of course, I understood that as, right, I'm investing 20 years, so 5 years is nothing. But now we look at recruits that are coming in now, and I tell them when they say, hey, I want to get the day tour when I come out of the training academy. And I go, well, you're brand new. You need to kind of put your time in. Instead of them saying, oh, well, that, I don't like that, but I'm going to deal with it. They're saying, well, I don't like that. And I spoke to a bunch of my friends, and they don't deal with that in their job. So I'm just going to quit. I'm going to find another job, right? So it's two-pronged, right? How do we create a training environment that shows that we're investing in our people, not just police officers, but also how do we shift this cultural dynamic of longevity and really embrace the idea that maybe people are leaving after 3 to 5 years, not because they don't necessarily like policing anymore, but because they're not growing as much as they'd like to.
Yeah, I think in our paper, Jill and I call this generation job hop, right? It's like at one point, a lot of different jobs in a short amount of time was kind of considered a red flag on a resume. But we looked at all this research that suggests that job hopping can actually yield knowledge and skills that really enhance employability. And it's a way that a lot of younger workers in particular are using to, kind of level up the pay scale faster than they would otherwise. So yeah, offering a route to specialized training, assignment to a specialized unit, I think that those are great suggestions. And I'm glad you also brought up communication. You know, that's something that's so important in every job, but in particularly when you're a police officer in high stress, high stakes situations that police find themselves in, it's even more important. Jill and I did a paper on police use of force, and you know, so much of the use of force cases begin at that communication phase, right? It's some breakdown in communication that results in the use of force. So yeah, thank you for that. I'd like to go over to Chief Cox one more time here. Chief, getting into the solutions piece, because that's what we're interested in here. What has worked and what hasn't when it has come to both recruiting, but I would say even more important, retention, retaining good officers in a mid-sized city like Albany?
So, one of the things as far as working for doing recruiting itself, one thing is definitely utilizing the resources you have. And by that, I mean, engage your current officers to help recruit your future officers. We have a lot to Jason's point, like we have a lot of great young officers that want to be involved, that want to take a part, that have a stake in this. And they have a lot of great ideas, and they actually want to help recruit that next generation. They want to recruit the partner that's going to be in the car with them. Have them out there, listen to them, get them in, and have them actually be a part of that solution. Have them be the ones that are saying, hey, join the APD. Like, here's what it means to be an officer, and here's what the next steps are. Have them be part of the folks that are out there helping do the physical agility test, helping keep that next group engaged, the group that's taken the test, have them be there doing physical agility, understanding what it means to be a police officer, and really keep them involved. I think that helps keep them fresh. That is a big thing. But to the retainment, retaining is a hard piece. So, when I came on decades ago in 1994, I was wishing there was overtime out there. It was difficult to come by. And I mean, for us, it was you made an arrest and you went to court. That was how we got our overtime. It was not the right way to do things, but that's how we made our overtime. Today's world, we're mandating officers to be here 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. So one of the first things I heard back was, officers value their time. They want to be able to take time off, and we're not able to meet that demand. So although this is temporary, we were able to negotiate with the union. And I know this sounds crazy that we had to negotiate this, but we had to negotiate with the union to be able to say, we're gonna mandate that officers get their 2 days off. We're ultimately not gonna force people to work on the days they're supposed to have off. But what that meant is that more senior officers might actually get forced to work when shifts are open and no one volunteers to sign up for that overtime. So older officers then, and I say older, I mean they have 2 or 3 years on the job. They're 25 years old. So to me, that's my kid's age. They might be forced to work. Now, some of those officers were like, well, wait a second, I've already gone through this rotation. I've already been forced to work when I first started. We had to say to them, well, do we want to just continue to churn through officers? Because one of the things we saw was that officers with 2 years on the job, to the point of going from place to place, were like, well, I can go to a smaller agency that's not mandating officers to have to work a lot of overtime. And because I value my time and I'm not looking to make $250,000 a year, I don't really care about that part of it. I'll just go to a smaller agency that I'm not going to be forced to work all those hours, and I'll have an easier life. So let me do that. So we have to work to retain, and we have to look and recognize that we have to take care of our officers. And to that point, one of the things that we're in the process of doing is we have a really good employee assistance program. But if we're going to continue to ultimately support that employee assistance program, we have to give them the resources. So we're hiring a director of health and wellness to provide that support, to make sure that we're taking care of every piece of our officer, the physical piece, the mental piece, the psychological, the nutritional, everything, and giving them the resources they need. So those are just some of the pieces.
Yeah, perfect. I'm so glad that you brought up using your current officers to help recruit future officers. I think, good law enforcement leaders like yourself make recruitment and retention a priority for everyone in the agency. I would just compare it to, you know, when you're searching for a suspect, right? The task is not just given to one person. It is often a group effort involving other units, sometimes other departments. You know, I think recruiting and retention should work the same way. I think employer referral systems, like you talk about there, make every officer, you know, a potential recruit. In our paper on this, we call this section "Good Cops, No Good Cops." You know, I think if you want to hire good cops, look to the good cops you already have, because they either know people or they know the qualities in people that make for a good police officer. So I think many departments are even rewarding successful referrals with kind of a finder's fee bonus on paychecks, like you know, or even time off, cash, whatever it is. I think having learned about the agency firsthand, referred candidates also will have a more realistic view of the job. The research bears this out. Research indicates that candidates brought in through these crowdsourced methods and informal avenues actually are more likely to be hired and tend to stay longer as well. So I think that was a really good point you made there. I'd like to just go over to Jill here. So Jill, you are currently at John Jay, and you are basically teaching the next generation of criminal justice professionals right now. You know, kids who are interested in the profession. So what are you hearing from students about why they're either reluctant to pursue a career in policing or any kind of roadblocks that they're experiencing?
So I teach in the LPS, the Law, Police Science, and Criminal Justice Administration program, and I usually teach the capstone. So that end of your 4-year degree program, your capstone in criminological theories, that's kind of like the culmination of the next step of your life. And most of these students 20 years ago, they wanted to pursue some position in the criminal justice field. Many of them wanted to go into a law enforcement career. Today, that's not the case. I'd say I average, 100 students per term, per year, sorry, about 50 per term, and maybe 20 to 25% of them have already declared that they want to pursue policing, but the rest are like, I don't know. It is important to say, though, that my students are not anti-police. That's very important. I keep them attuned to what's going on in local policing as well as on the national scale, and we often talk about different public safety initiatives, and we also talk about a lot of criticism that law enforcement does get. But they still believe in service and they believe in what policing wants to do, but they are honest about the trade-offs, and they're doing the math that 21-year-olds didn't do back in the day. So first, they see instability. When you watch the news and you see departments are just, I'm so understaffed, I don't have enough cops, response times to 911 calls are through the roof, we're not catching all the bad guys. They're like, what? There's going to be mandated overtime. And as both of my colleagues on this webinar have said, like, that's not something a lot of people want to sign up for, constant inconsistency or instability in their scheduling. So policing, it doesn't look like the heroic service that a lot of us took this job for many years ago. It kind of looks like, as my students call it, burnout machine, and they don't want a career where exhaustion is already built into it. So chronic understaffing has forced a lot of agencies into this constant overtime just to meet the basic calls for service, and that is pacing with resignations. Also, this younger generation, as many of us have talked about, is worried about their lifestyle. So my students compare policing to other public safety or public safety adjacent positions that pay competitively without the same physical risk, without the media attention, without the scrutiny, or without the scheduling chaos. So the private sector is openly competing for the same talent pool with better starting salaries, more predictable hours, and remote or hybrid options. Additionally, this generation is skeptical about upward mobility. We are starting to see more people get their college degree, even though we're starting to see more agencies say that we don't need a college degree. And if you've gone to school and you've attained a degree, you want to know that you have a future in something, whatever that is you choose to be. A lot of them say, if I do everything right, where am I going to be in 10 years? So they've heard not only from me, but other officers, when I have guest lecturers come in, they say that agencies have hit ceilings and they get stuck in the same assignment, or they feel unappreciated or undervalued. And they're not willing to sign up for a culture where development is wait your turn and don't complain about it. They want, as Chief Cox noted, they want mentoring, they want wellness support, they want educational incentives, and they really want a clear path to promotion. So when agencies can't articulate that path, potential candidates read it as a leadership problem, not as a public perception problem. And finally, trust. And Dr. Mazeski had talked about culture. Trust and culture go hand in hand. So my younger students, they tell me they're worried that one controversial encounter, one questionable encounter with a civilian, even if it's deemed completely lawful, then they find it could be career ending just because of politics. And they're asking themselves, will my department, will my agency back me, even if I follow policy? But if the public's mad, are they going to throw me under the bus? So if the answer sounds uncertain, many of them are just going to walk away completely.
Right. Yeah. And then, that's too bad. You mentioned earlier that, public sector salaries aren't as competitive as the private sector can be. So I think that is not, there's not a lot we can do about that. But I think one thing we can do is offer a reason for people to join the police. And I think when I talk to people who are considering becoming police officers, often they cite reasons that go beyond salary, right? When asked, why'd you become a cop, many officers will say some version of, I wanted to help people, right? That's often something you hear. And police departments are public service organizations, so it makes sense that they would attract people interested in public service. I think some of the best recruiters I've seen actually lean into this, right? They lean into that core value with messaging that reinforces how officers are serving a purpose greater than themselves. So even though the salary and the benefits and even the working conditions may be superior elsewhere, perhaps in the private sector, I think those intrinsic benefits of public service and helping people will always and naturally attract a certain people to law enforcement, I'd say. So I'd like to go back to Dr. Mazeski for a second here. Just all the lessons that you learned over your years at the NYPD and in your new work now. What are some lessons that large departments like the NYPD or what are some lessons that smaller departments can take from larger departments or vice versa to help modernize recruitment and training?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I hate to say that I'm not sure how much can really be taken from any department at this point, because I don't think anybody's figured it out, right? We don't, as police in the policing industry, we don't know how we're going to navigate this. But I think some larger departments have taken steps in recruitment and retention that smaller departments could probably take from. First and foremost is diversifying the way in which they're recruiting, right? So understanding that it's not just about college fairs and really investing back into that core. And this has been said multiple times already. Word of mouth, right? The best way to recruit great officers is when Uncle Johnny comes over for Thanksgiving and tells young Joey, hey, kid, go take the test. It's a good job. Now, especially now in 2025, Uncle Johnny's coming over and saying, don't you dare take that test, go find something else. So how can the policing industry get back into the good graces of our senior officers, right? We spend a lot of time, and I think this is really important. We can't throw out the baby with the bathwater, and understanding that we do want to invest in our younger generation, but it's the older generation. And when I say older, the people with a couple of years on that are bringing people in. So for instance, with a larger department offering these fraternal organizations and these extracurricular activities or organizations. Now, it may be difficult for small departments to, let's say, offer a full softball team, but many smaller departments work on a county level, right, or a parish level. So bringing smaller departments together to create these organizations, whether it be sports oriented or just hobby oriented, showing that we're trying to invest in you as a professional person, not just a police officer. Also, something that the Chief Cox is doing, which I'm really excited about, is the idea of creating and investing more in health and wellness, right? Again, people want to know that you're investing in them. So having these units that are going to concentrate on mental wellness, and I mean, we could probably have a whole other discussion about the stigma beyond behind that. But you know, physical wellness, nutrition. The NYPD, when I had left, had 3 nutritionists, full-time nutritionists, that were on staff. And all they did was provide officers with these nutrition plans, and they had the time to reach out and say, "Hey, how you doing with this?" It wasn't just you walk in, you get a pamphlet, and you leave. Remember, it's all about investing in people. Hey, remember we spoke last week? How's this working out? So programs like that, where it could be county based, for smaller departments, or some type of mutual agreement between departments to have these programs available.
Yeah, those are all great great points there. I'd like to go over to Chief Cox again for 1 second. So there's a tension that you know, law enforcement leaders are facing right now. It's you said earlier that Albany is down about 20% from where you want to be in terms of your staffing. So there's this need to hire new officers, right, and do it fast. But there's also this need to maintain standards of professionalism, of trust, and these two can be in tension with each other. You know, if you're hiring quickly, you might fall down on that other category. You might the temptation is there to lower standards, right, to get people in the door. But what we don't want is below standard officers, right? So how do you deal with this tension? How do you balance the need to hire folks quickly while maintaining those standards of professionalism and trust that we need in police officers?
So I don't think we have to, like you said, I don't think we have to lower the standards. I think we just have to change how we hire. So, you know, we are still going about the same civil service process. So, I mean, I could speak only to New York, right? But we're still going about the same civil service process, basically, that we did when I got hired in 1994. You know, we provide for a single test, a single location. We wait months before somebody gets their test score. And then once they get their test score, then we can finally start doing a process where we do a background check, a physical agility test, a psychological exam, a medical exam, and the background check. And then we can finally offer somebody their job. As opposed to, you know, Jillian was talking about the private sector before, as opposed to the private sector where somebody goes onto LinkedIn, they upload the resume, and all of a sudden they get a phone call and they get an interview and they start a process and they hear right away and they get offered a job. Well, I don't think we can do that because we do have to hold some standards up. But I do believe that we don't have to wait for one single date for a test and wait 3 months to get them their exam score and then wait months upon months to get all of that other process done. Because like what we found most recently is that we went to 2 dates for a police exam. We had teams of people doing a great job recruiting people, but the drop-off number from the number of people that signed up for the exam compared to that actually showed up to the exam was unbelievable. I mean, we had 425 people sign up for the last exam, mainly due to really hard work of the men and women on our recruiting team, only to have 175 people show up on the Saturday to take the exam. Well, clearly there's a breakdown. Whereas if that 425 people that we signed up, now some of them maybe they just threw their name down because they were like, I want to get this person off my back. But at the same time, if we were able to say, here, sit down on this computer and take the exam now, we might have gotten closer to the 425 people that were willing to sign up to take the exam. And if in 24 hours to 48 hours, we could have gotten that Scantron test back to say, here, you got a 90, let's start the process of getting you hired. We're 75 people down. I don't have to wait for a police academy to swear you in. Let's hire you. Let's get you acclimated to this police department. Let's get you a position within the department. You're not out arresting people. You're not out writing tickets. There's plenty of training to do. We have a new class we're swearing in on November 7th. 3 of those people have already started. They're already getting trained. The police academy doesn't start until November 11th. But at the end of the day, I have plenty of places to put them, plenty of things to teach them already. One of them we were going to lose. So we were like, you know what? Let's not lose this person. They're going to go to another police department. They're going to go somewhere else. So we have to change. We have to get out of our mindset of going, well, they'll come to us. That was fine when there was only a couple of slots and there were 2,000 people taking the test and it didn't matter. I was willing to wait and go, oh, I'll bartend until I get my job. And that's fine. That's not where we are anymore, because people are willing to take other jobs, other opportunities, because it's not so much that it's the dream job anymore. It is a different generation. There certainly are some people that it's a dream job for, but it's not so much what that's about anymore.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm glad to hear that you are dealing with this issue with little introspection. It's like, what can we be doing better? Streamlining the hiring process, I think, is something that many agencies could do better. And it's something, I think, just talking about those generational differences again, it's something that younger generations, I think, expect out of the hiring process, because they've grown up with online hiring, right? And that's kind of the system that they expect. I just wanted to to dwell on that for 1 second. I did want to go to Jill on the same question for 1 second, because we have seen departments lower their standards, and I know, Jill, you've done some work on this. You've done some work on what the problem is. Why is it a bad idea to lower standards for police? We're going off script here a little bit, but I just want to get your take on this.
Well, you're referring to my PhD research,
Yes,
Logan,
exactly.
which is
Yes,
not published yet. So
well, give us a preview.
we'll just say that a lot of agencies, and there's been articles in Governing and in State Line, just in the last 3 months, talking about all different agencies all over the country who are feeling forced to lower standards. Most of the time, we are seeing a reduction in educational requirements. We know that the NYPD just did that this year. Previously, the NYPD had scaled back their physical fitness requirements. They subsequently reinstated those previously scaled back physical fitness requirements, but a lot of agencies are trying to, I don't like using the word dumb down, but in some respect, that's what we're seeing. It is to open up that applicant pool, to get more people in the door, to qualify more people at stage 1 to at least apply. Because yes, there should be a high standard, but we shouldn't be excluding people from this job, from this profession, if they're interested. But a lot of the research does show that the more education you have, the better communication skills you have. And as Dr. Mazeski was talking, that's like a cop's #1 job and #1 weapon is their mouth, giving someone a direct command to comply. And that is how most of what policing is just talking to people. So education has shown to reinforce communication skills, which does show reduction in use of force incident. Also, I am doing independent research on physical fitness requirements because I am of the mindset that if we have a physically agile force, those that have enough stamina to deal with possibly physical altercations with members of the public, if you are more physically fit, you are able to then use hand-to-hand combat. Maybe you'll have to go to your straight baton or your ASP or your OC spray, but you will not have to elevate to the taser level. You will not have to elevate to the firearm level. So that's where I come from. I think that if we do reduce standards, ultimately we will see increased citizen complaints and we will see increased use of force incident rates. Again, not proven because I'm still doing this research, but that is just what I hypothesize. And just looking at it over the last 15, 20 years, talking to cops across the nation. Obviously working in NYPD, I got to talk to them, but I was one of them. So I have biases there, but going to other agencies, talking to other chiefs of police, other sheriffs, even then they're nervous. They're like, I don't want to reduce my standards so much so that I'm hiring people that just are not qualified. I don't want to fill a seat. I want to make my community safe. I want to make my constituents feel like they have good people in these patrol cars. So it is a concern overall, but it's just now clear desperation that's causing some of these agencies to have to lower their standards.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up physical fitness because that goes back to Dr. Mazeski's point about nutritionists on staff at NYPD, or Chief Cox's point about wellness programs for officers. You know, if we can make officers more physically fit, perhaps they won't have to resort to deadly force. You know, as you say, perhaps they can handle themselves, you know, just physically a little bit better. So I think that's a great point to make. So I'll stick with you for a second, Jill. So just given those points you made. From a policy perspective, what are some of the most impactful initiatives that jurisdictions can implement right now to start rebuilding the force?
So a lot of this is drawn from the paper, and I believe that we did put the paper in the chat for the attendees to read at a later date. So I have a lot that I could say right now because I talk a lot, but we only have 60 minutes for this. So I boiled it down to 4. Some of it's reinforcing what Dr. Mazeski and Chief Cox has discussed. So number 1 would be modernize hiring. Don't just lower standards. And actually, when Chief Cox was talking, I started laughing because I know, Jason, you and I actually did our applications on typewriters. And we became cops in this millennium, so it's kind of crazy to imagine doing your application on a typewriter after the year 2000. But again, agencies are also doing that 1 day a year testing. Looking at it across the board, I've seen other agencies bump it up to 2 times a year, like Chief Cox had mentioned. But your larger municipalities that are looking to fill like hundreds of seats, they can't rely on just 2 Saturdays a year to ensure that they have enough people in the door. As Logan had talked about, this advanced technology and streamlined hiring process. There are applicant processing and applicant tracking software systems that private sector companies do offer to help agencies that may have limited resources for moving people through the pipeline from applicant to candidate. But this exists in the real world, and it is actually more effective. It's less costly than trying to employ your own resources. If you're taking already a strained staff of police officers and also making them do all of your behind the scenes applicant processing, those officers would probably be better off on the street because that's their job. And using these third parties or using these corporate endeavors to use for your applicant processing is something that I think is a really great idea. Targeted incentives. So I'm not just talking about like you sign up to be a cop and I'm going to give you $20,000. That really, looks like appealing, but it's really not in the long run. So states are starting to fund structured incentives. So relocation bonuses for experienced laterals, tuition or student loan reimbursement, retention pay bumps. So a lot of agencies, you'll get a bump at 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, but having something that someone knows is certain. So if I become a cop, my first 3 years, I get this percentage increase. And then after my next 5, I get this, knowing that I'm working towards something more. Statewide recruitment bonuses or law enforcement student loan repayments, they're not just thank you payments. They are competitive tools that have been shown to keep good officers walking away from the force. Number 3 would be dedicated investigative and analytical capacity. This is something that I've been working on with R Street on case clearance rates. So patrol officers are your go-to. They answer the 911 calls for service. They're dealing with people constantly in the streets. Those are the officers you're flagging down when you need something, but they are drowning because special operations forces that are trying to do other things, we just don't have enough manpower right now. So when you're short-staffed, patrol is racing from call to call, and it kills morale. And one immediate fix is to try and, if we can get more people in the door to the job, then we could effectively promote or advance those patrol officers who have a few years experience, hopefully 5, to those investigative units or those specialty units like crime gun intelligence centers, real-time analysis centers, digital evidence units, and that will take some of the pressure off those frontline officers that are trying to do so many things. Michigan, Georgia, and other jurisdictions have stood up state-supported forensic, ballistic, and analytical capacity for local police officers because clearance rates and officer morale, they are linked. If you don't close cases, everyone feels like what they're doing doesn't matter. And this is a huge boost for retention because cops want to feel effective. And lastly, I want to go back to the wellness. So officer wellness is infrastructure. It's not like a perk. And I'm not talking about putting yoga mats in the muster rooms. We're talking about building policies around work-life balance, trauma counseling, peer support, physical fitness, nutrition. Research shows that agencies who invest in wellness, fitness facilities, nutritional support, access to mental health care without fear of stigma, they don't just see healthier officers, they see lower force incidents, lower suicide rates, and better retention. So in other words, wellness is both a duty of care and a risk reduction strategy.
Okay, yeah, those are all a lot of good ideas, kind of in a short time span there. Yeah, if you want to see those expanded out to some degree, I'd click on the paper because we go into more depth into all that stuff. So we got about 10 minutes left here. I just remind everybody, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. We'll get to those at the end. So for Dr. Mazeski, kind of wrapping up here. What you focus on training in your work? What role do you see mentorship, career development, training playing in keeping recruits engaged past those 3 to 5 years? That is kind of the critical time frame to kind of establish themselves as a police officer.
Yeah, so when we think of police training, and I referred to this in a couple of the presentations I've done, we're indoctrinating new members into our community, right? This policing living creature. When it comes to mentorship, right, putting the right people in training positions is 100% the way to do it. We've gotten these people in the door, they've entered our training program, and now we have these. And I'm sorry to say, we have these dinosaurs, right? These people with 30 years on that of experience that think, hey, kid, I'm really going to show you how it's done, right? And some of these trainers who take their experience over utilizing good adult learning practices, they believe that they're now going to break these new recruits down, right? And strip them away from their norms and social values that they've grown up with, and create these officers that after 6 months will go out and be exactly what they believe they should be. Training needs to move away from that. It's not the training officer or the instructor or the mentor's job to strip these people down to the bare fundamentals and build them back up into what we want to see. They are adults. They come with experience. They come with social norms, values, and ethics. We need to build on that, right? Building professional people instead of these police machines that we all thought we were building years past. So invest in your trainers. Make sure your trainers understand the mission, what we want, and how we want policing to grow. And if we create these new officers out of these great professional people, they're going to bring more professional people in. And when it comes to career advancement or just career planning, start early, right? Start career planning in the initial recruitment phase. Show the recruits that, hey, listen, we want you to start looking to what you want to do. Also, once we all get on the same page, understanding that career advancement or career placement may be, hey, listen, I know you may want to leave here in 5 years. So how can we prepare you for that? Yeah, there's nothing better when it comes to proving that you're investing in this person than saying, we identify that you may look to leave, so we want to prepare you to grow. And possibly that growth is within this department, but it might be in another department. And if everybody's on the same page with that, well, it's going to work both ways. We may lose people, but we may gain people from another agency because they want the experience that we have here. So starting career planning early and not concentrating on so much, hey, we want to keep you within your role here, but we'd love to do that. But if you want to do something else, well, we'll help you with that also.
Yeah, I absolutely love how you put that. You know, like any professional, police officers are seeking more than a job. They want a career, right? So in opportunities for career development in our research are strongly correlated with retention throughout the labor market, and police officers are no exception to that. So I think those points you made are super important. So yeah, going back to Chief Cox here, you know, one of the things we've talked about pretty much for this whole whole webinar today is some of the generational differences we see in recruits today versus in the past. One thing you're doing is streamlining the hiring process, which I think the younger generations expect, and so that's great. One thing that's been very appealing in the past are retirement and pensions for people, and that has changed as well to some degree. I think those pensions have been scaled back. I think retirement benefits are a little less attractive to the younger generation. Maybe they're just not thinking about it quite in the same way as older people. But I just want to get just a key in on some of those generational differences real quick. How do you see generational differences shaping the future of recruitment and workplace culture? What other forces are you seeing there?
So to me, it's about adapting and listening and making changes that this generation wants, and recognizing that we can't be stuck in well, just because I came on and just because me as a younger officer or a younger supervisor was, well, you do as I say, we're a paramilitary organization, this is how it works. That's not what it is anymore. And I'm going to give a quick solid example. So when I came back, we I was still involved in policing even in my gap years, but we very much had a no beard policy in Albany. And when I came back, I noticed there was plenty of officers that were walking around with hair on their chins. So I said to a few officers, I said, hey, did something change in the policy since I've been gone? And what I found out was a lot of officers were getting doctor's notes that they couldn't shave because they had some mysterious issue going on that wasn't allowing them to shave. So I said, okay. I said, that sounds good. And a couple of other officers who knew me spoke up and said, hey, it would be a big morale booster if we could have beards. So I came back to my command staff and I said, what do you all think about beards? And I had a split command staff. I had some command staff members, no, that's crazy. What do these guys want? That's too much. And other command staff members were like, no, let's just go for it. So, I said to everybody, I said, listen, if we have morale that's down and we have this new generation, that all it's going to take is signing a new order that says they can have beards and here's the standards, it's a win. So if this new generation, my generation, if we ever said to the bosses when I came on in 1994, we wanted beards, I would have been out walking a beat in the rain and snow and everything else. That just would have been a no-go. So if all we have to do is listen and adapt and change, well, then let's do that. I'm 55. It's time for me to do that and move on and understand that. So we have to listen to our 20-year-olds, to our 25-year-olds, and make those changes and make this more meaningful for them. Because for me, when I was their age, it was about how much money could I make? What was that dollar sign going to be? That was what it was about. If this generation wants something different, then I have to listen to that generation and I have to implement things. And a beard policy isn't going to close the 75-person gap that we have. But if that's going to be part of the answer, and if that's going to help, then I need to listen and I need to change. And I can't just be stuck in my ways.
Yeah, I'd like to see I'd like to see some of those doctor's notes. I wonder what kind of pathogen, requires a beard to ward off, right? That'd be interesting to know. But that just reminds me of, agencies used to have no tattoos policies as well, and that has changed, right? You see many officers have tattoos, and that's a reflection of the younger generation, which is tattoos are just more common. Or relaxed policies around minor drug convictions in the past, as cannabis has been made legal in various states, you've seen agencies have to relax some of those policies around minor drug convictions. Jill, I think I'll give it to you. We have about a minute left. I'll let you wrap it up here. Looking ahead, what policy frameworks or funding mechanisms can ensure that we have a stable police workforce going forward, and it becomes a long-term bipartisan priority? I think it is to some degree, but what can we do to make sure that happens?
So I want to answer that, but I also want to just show that there is a question from Dylan Delasanti in the Q&A. If you want, so to what extent are attempts at, which is super interesting since I've written about this, to what extent are attempts at police accountability measures, QI reform, that's qualified immunity for those of you that don't know, and the like, responsible for hiring and retention difficulty? So Logan, I would like to answer that. And please,
then please.
Okay.
Quickly,
So
we
just-
only have about a minute left.
Yes,
so.
I know. I'll speak quickly like I always do. Honestly, accountability efforts like QI reform, they are not the main reasons agencies are struggling to hire and retain, but they have made the job seem less appealing to a certain type of candidate. So the vast majority of officers, and I guarantee Dr. Mazeski and Chief Cox will agree with me, all of us are supportive of fair accountability, and we want bad cops held responsible because it protects the integrity of the profession. But when reforms are written or messaged in ways that make officers feel they're personally exposed to civil liability for doing their jobs in good faith, that is where we'll see that deterring effect of more people coming on the job. So I don't think it's reforms holistically that are making people less likely to join. I think it is the way in which those reforms are messaged to certain groups of people. I don't know if Chief Cox or Dr. Mazeski want to add to that, because I think both of you can.
Yeah, anything to add?
I
think
think
perfectly
perfectly said.
You summed it up great, Jillian. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today on this webinar. I learned a ton from today, and I learned a ton from y'all. So I want to thank our panelists here. Thanks to everyone who joined, and yeah, please check out the paper on this subject. Check out our work at R Street going forward on this subject, and everybody have a great week. Thanks so much for joining us.